their genuine involvement in the process, as we can interpret all this. But for us negotiators, having this rush is actually something that undermines the quality of the process. And if everybody wants to have a sustainable solution, it shouldn't be done like with the mark of having a decision made by Christmas only. So this definitely is a shortfall of all this space.
We are entering what could be a crucial few days for the future of Ukraine. Donald Trump's special envoy Steve Witkoff is on his way to Berlin to meet with President Zelensky and other European leaders to discuss the latest version of the proposed peace plan, with the Americans keen to have a deal in place by Christmas. It'll all be over by Christmas. Keir Starmer is expected to join them in Germany on Monday. The latest diplomatic push comes as more than 1 million households are without electricity in Ukraine after a barrage of overnight Russian strikes hit energy and industrial infrastructure in Odessa. Iuliia Osmolovska is a former diplomat with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine, who's now a director of the think tank Globsec, which is based in Kiev. Hi, Iuliia.
Hi, Nick.
Thank you
for having me.
No, well, I'm very glad you can make it, because you were saying that your power was coming in and out. Was that as a result of last night's attacks?
Not of the last night's attack, but of chain of attacks we had before in Kiev, because last night Odessa was seriously damaged. But actually, I'm one of them that had been affected, unfortunately, as you mentioned, because everybody is suffering right now from this electricity shortages in Kiev and Kiev region especially.
Yeah, the war of attrition that the Russians have been waging against you has been ramping up recently. So what do you think about these latest so-called peace talks?
Well, first you have to see to look at who is going to talk. If it would have been Donald Trump personally, then I would have been hoping for some kind of progress over the weekend. But because it's just his envoy coming to see the leaders of the E3 plus Ukraine, then it matters how he would interpret what he would be talking about back to Trump. So it's definitely impacts very much the conciseness of this understanding, and this is definitely not the end in this long chain of negotiations. So I think, and most of Ukrainians are thinking, that probably before the Christmas we won't have any kind of parameters agreed by all sides.
I mean, that seems almost a racing certainty, I would say, because Russia just aren't coming to the plate, are they? They don't seem to want to make any concessions whatsoever.
Yes, of course. And the main problem, the strategic error or systemic error in all this set of negotiations, how I see it, is actually because all of us are acting as if Russia is actually literally standing on the threshold of Kiev and Ukraine is going to collapse tomorrow. This is not the case. This is the point. And if you can analyze the progress that Russians managed to achieve the last year in advancing over territories, it's just 1.45% of all the Ukraine's territory. So it's actually not the case to consider something which is given to Ukraine in terms of capitulation or unquestionable concessions that should be made by Ukrainian side only.
Do you appreciate the Americans? I mean, you could characterize it as impatience or urgency, but do you appreciate the speed at which they want to move in order to reach peace, or are you suspicious of it?
We do appreciate their genuine involvement in the process, as we can interpret all this. But for us negotiators, having this rush is actually something that undermines the quality of the process. And if everybody wants to have a sustainable solution, it shouldn't be done like with the mark of having a decision made by Christmas only. So this definitely is a shortfall of all this space.
Last time I had a discussion about this on Times Radio, there seemed to be, oh God, I hate myself for saying this, but a kind of vibe shift about what Ukraine might be prepared to put up with, whether it's ceding of territory or other things that wouldn't be ideal in a perfect world. Where do you think Ukraine is prepared to negotiate right now, given the military situation on the ground?
Well, we again are being led into this trap of discussing technical details of what Ukraine is ready to consider as part of the territories or not. We have to understand and to see the the general spirit of all the different agreements, and they're very closely interlinked. Like, for instance, if you're talking about the concessions that Ukraine is ready to consider on territory, it should be closely linked to what kind of security guarantees Ukraine would receive, and the other way around. If you talk about reducing the size of Ukrainian army, what about Russian army? Where's the reciprocity principle in all this? So I think that it's too premature to talk about what we are ready to consider and to explain to ourselves as a justifiable thing for Ukraine to move, unless we see the entire agreement and understand where we are. Because Americans are saying that the key purpose of all this is to secure and help Ukraine regaining its sovereignty. But if they're pushing us into these presidential elections, what is it? Is it not the interference in internal political matters of Ukraine and the breach of sovereignty on internal politics that we should have? So I see a sort of inconsistency in these kind of statements and actions.
You raised the issue of elections. Obviously, that would give the public a great deal more say in the potential future direction of Ukraine. Where is public opinion right now on what has been an incredibly costly and grinding war?
Yeah, I think that the main problem around this whole war, and especially in Russian assessments, had been that they underestimated the factor of Ukraine's society. And this is exactly the case right now, too, because internally we are not demanding the immediate change of the president. Yes, we do understand that he's taking longer, but because of the martial law status. Yes, there are some questions to the efficiency of his management and the integrity of his team, but this is something that should be considered in the second priority, because the immediate priority that we have right now is existential threat coming from Russia. And we need to have this issue fixed first, and then to consider what kind of president should we have. But this should be only the internal decision of Ukraine without any external coercion, definitely.
Do you see America as the overwhelmingly significant player in all of this? Or would you like to see Europe, your near cousins, stepping up and actually trying to dictate either the negotiations or the policy direction for your allies and neighbours?
I think that's what I found quite strange, that we are not seeing Europe being very much in the visible scene here. Definitely the East is playing great role in supporting Ukraine and helping Ukraine to be prepared for these talks. But basically it's legitimate right for Europe to say that we have to be at the negotiation table because we are key stakeholders. It is about European security. Ukraine's war in Ukraine is about European security. We should be considered as equal partners and stakeholders. And this is not the case. And second, I think that psychologically it is still a problem that everybody is just scared to consider this bad scenario, of course, but it's a realistic scenario. Or what if America withdraws all its supports? What will happen? Yes, it's going to be much worse alternative, but there still will be alternative and life behind it. So unless we are bold enough and have this courage to see the situation, assess it, and to understand how we should act in this case, it would give us more liberty and independence and strength talking to Americans. And also there is an issue that Europe has to understand what are their strengths when it comes to the partnership and alliance with the US, that Europe is an indispensable partner with America. And this is something that should be conveyed probably not in public discussions or negotiations, but rather non-public talks. But definitely this would help to secure a more visible place of European partners at the negotiation table.
In a few moments, Iuliia, I'm going to be talking to a professor of financial law about the freezing of Russian assets permanently, and then what might be able to be put in place to allow them to be spent or utilised by Ukraine in a post-ceasefire world, or perhaps in a pre-ceasefire world. Do you welcome the fact that there is this discussion being had, or do you think it's a bit of a sideshow to the immediate threat that you're facing?
No, I think it's definitely part of a bigger picture and a very important part, because it also increases the leverage over Russia. Because if you analyze thoroughly where they are with the economic situation, and we have a brilliant paper just being released by Ukrainian economists and the London School of Economics about the actual Russian performance in military-driven economy, and they don't have much of the resources and capacity to sustain this war next year. So this is why this kind of alternative step would be very, very, very important for Russia to consider. And they, of course, are bluffing about saying that there will be retaliation from our side and it will be treated badly in Russia. But, of course, what they can do. It's really very difficult economic perspective for them. So I do encourage you to follow.
And very, very quickly, because we've got to go, Iuliia, what would be the ideal Christmas news for you at the end of this year? What would it look like for you?
The parties has to agree to negotiate further and to consider all these things meaningfully and not in a rush.
Iuliia, thank you for your time. Iuliia Osmolovska, who is director of the think tank Globsec in Kiev.